Don't forget to visit marketingcasts.com to find even more custom curated marketing podcasts just like this one. That's marketingcasts.com. Hi, this is Sean Halter, host of the CMO Suite podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and catch up on all the previous episodes at www.thecmosuite.com. This episode of the CMO Suite is brought to you by Uconnect. Uconnect provides digital solutions and teams to brand CMOs, VPs, and marketers looking for true transparency in the biddable media space. From paid social and PPC to complex platforms like The Trade Desk, brands from across the world have connected to Uconnect. Visit them today at uconnect.com. And No Kid Hungry. We're proud to promote No Kid Hungry and their many initiatives to help kids in need of meals. Visit them at nokidhungry.org. This episode of the CMO Suite is also brought to you by Winmo. Winmo is the most comprehensive and widely used advertising database, providing an unfair advantage to media and marketing professionals nationwide. Winmo tracks every national advertiser, their agency relationships, and key executives within each organization. Get instant media spend, competitor tracking, and industry trend analysis in one easy-to-use application that integrates with all major CRM platforms. CMO Suite listeners receive complimentary trials of Winmo just by visiting winmo.com/CMO Suite. Finally, the CMO Suite is presented by the CMOcouncil.org as their official marketers podcast. The Chief Marketing Officer Council is the only global network of executives specifically dedicated to high-level knowledge exchange, thought leadership, and personal relationship building among senior corporate marketing leaders and brand decision makers. The CMO Council's 15,000 plus members control more than $550 billion in aggregated annual marketing expenditures and run complex distributed marketing and sales operations worldwide. For more information on membership, visit thecmocouncil.org. Let's start the show.
You're in the CMO Suite, the podcast for marketers who want to be in the know, presented by Connectivity Holdings.
This is your host, Sean Halter. As a reminder, we are in Season 5 of the CMO Suite. The CMO Suite is presented in part by Uconnect. Uconnect provides biddable media solutions to brands and agencies across the U.S. that are looking for help in the programmatic and biddable media space. I'm excited to have with me as my guest. This is a guy who I've met several years ago. He is currently the Chief Marketing Officer at Jefferson Dental and Orthodontics. It is Adam Arnette. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sean. Glad to be here.
I have actually met you, I hate to say, like 7 or 8 years ago now. We were lucky enough to have gotten an invite to do a co-pitch with another agency. There's a brand agency, Eraser Farm, great group. Got a chance to come out, kind of met you from that. We ended up kind of working on a couple things here and there along the way, but then just managed to stay in touch. And as I often seem to find with LinkedIn, which is my favorite social media platform, a chance really just to reconnect in some ways, continue to provide some insights on things I'm working on, but always interesting to see where the paths seem to take some of the guests and people that I've met along the way. So you're in Texas. We were just talking a little bit briefly just about some storms that happened, a while back, how everybody navigated their way through that. It is a stormy year nonetheless for lots of people. We thought that things would be completely kind of open back up by now. I'm in Florida, so it's pretty close. But at the same time, everybody's kind of navigating through what 2021 is going to kind of look like. And so I want to talk about your history and how you ended up there. But at the same time, how is 2021 kind of shaping up for you personally?
Yeah, you bet. Well, starting with kind of how I got here, I guess. So we did meet, close. I think it was closer to maybe 10 years ago. Aging ourselves here a little bit.
I don't know what your club age is, so I didn't want to, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. It probably was almost 10 years ago.
We started young, right? So, but yeah, so we that was at North American Spine. That was so I started actually in, just putting it simply, direct marketing, but being able to craft and tell a really good story and convey the value to potential surgeons across the country.
You were talking about performance-based marketing 10 years ago. And again, I'll be honest, we came to that meeting, we sat with you at the time, you're talking about performance-based marketing, and I'm writing on my notepad, like, kind of what the hell is that? I was so used to this brand world, and there's nothing wrong with that, still very needed and necessary. But, you were no joke. Like you can't see it unless you're watching this on video. And if you are, don't look too far on the background. But, you had this whole board, this whole chart, this whole way of understanding, if we're going to put 10x in, we need to make sure that we get 15x back in a clarity way that, I'll be honest with you, at the time, 10, 12 years ago, I had probably not sat with somebody quite like you doing that. Did you grow grow up in math, or did you grow up in that space? Where did you grow up? Did you grow up in Texas? Have you always lived there?
Grew up in Texas, not known for math, but yeah. Look, I mean, my career was really just built around direct to consumer marketing, but ultimately, how do you derive ultimate financial performance from that, regardless of the business, right? And then that ultimately, over a number of years, led to when you and I met at North American Spine. We looked at a healthcare business. There was a small group of us that started that business, and we said, look, how can we redefine this space? We had a very we were lucky enough at the time to have a very interesting and innovative surgeon who had, as you know, pioneered this minimally invasive spine surgery. The brand was built around that, but that was just the product ultimately, right? So how do we craft something that hasn't really been done well in healthcare? And that was to create a great patient experience. So we, as you know, we built a customer experience focused platform, full service platform, concierge level to deliver this service ultimately to patients. And it was all built around that, but driven by performance marketing. And so that's when you and I met.
You said you grew up in Texas. What did your mom and dad do?
Grew up in Fort Worth, Texas. So my parents were from small town Texas, Decatur, Texas, and both ultimately went to OU. They were Sooners. They decided they were not going to become Longhorns for whatever reason. So I was raised a Sooner fan, being from Texas. So, love me or hate me. And then my dad ultimately went into the M&A world, and my mom did various things throughout time. Both parents entrepreneurial. My mom started clothing stores in Fort Worth when I was growing up, and just did a lot of different things. So pretty varied background.
What do your brothers do?
Yeah. So younger brother is a lawyer, and my older brother, he was born a wheeler dealer. So he owns a chain of pawn shops in Texas.
We have a client that's in the jewelry business. They had to end up getting their pawn license during COVID to be able to operate. But boy, what an interesting space. So between him being in pawn shop and you always out there building stuff, your brother is a lawyer, is probably at least a good person to have out there, depending on what kind of law he does. He's probably at least there to help keep you out of trouble to some extent. So we were talking about the fact that you really were, from my perspective, a pioneer in the space of performance-based marketing, and you've taken that with you along the way. And so ultimately, as you transition out of that company, tell me about where your next journey was. Was that at Noblesse, or was Noblesse part of that group?
Sure. So when North American Spine, we actually, our holding company was Athos. We built two companies, as you remember, North American Spine and Migraine Treatment Centers of America. Very similar platform to North American Spine. We were then acquired by a public company, Noblesse, and then we continued to build 5 other direct-to-consumer brands all around specialty surgical care. So I remained the CMO for a couple of years after they acquired us. And so we continued to build that business. And then as I moved on from there, a couple of things. I took some time off, and then I worked to help launch a biotech DTC brand in LA for 6 or 7 months. That was an interim role to help these guys launch this brand. I was out there 5 days a week for about 6 months.
Do you have kids?
I do.
I feel like a lot of my conversations with a lot of CMOs this year, marketers in general, especially people that are of an age, a lot of them have found, of course, we want everybody to be safe. We want everybody to be healthy. A lot of them have found this moment of pause to be healthy, to be able to kind of reset or level set, or be able to take some time with their kids while their kids are still kids, in a way that we often wouldn't give ourselves permission. We had to work 7 hours, 7 to 7 every day, 12 hours, whatever that is, to make sure that we're putting, the right food on the table and make sure our kids are taken care of. And meanwhile, you kind of look around and you suddenly kind of find out that maybe your kids just wish they had seen more of you. And it is that standard cliche. But for me, I ran into some of that last year when COVID hit. I just closed our office, sent everybody to work from home, decided I wasn't going to open that office back up. And it gave me a chance to be able to at least spend some time with my kids while they're 16 and 17 in a way that maybe I never would have gotten that chance.
Yeah, you bet. Well, and during that time when I was going out to LA, I mean, I've never, spent much time away from my kids at all. I've always, made that a priority and tried to balance as much as I can. But, at that time they were, juniors, sophomores, juniors, roughly in high school. I have twin daughters.
How old are your twins?
They're 19, identical girls here. So, but that was a little bit of a challenge, but I knew it was short term. And every chance I got, they went out to LA with me and they spent some time. And so we made it an adventure like anything else. And so, but right, like during this time of COVID, there have been some benefits like that, right? To those that maybe were traveling all the time and having to spend an inordinate amount of time away from their family. So, there have been some definite benefits personally, I think people have seen from it.
The opportunity with JDC comes along. How does that come along?
Yeah. So actually, while I was in LA, I wound up connecting with a private equity group based in LA that they own primarily retail and restaurant all over the country. Well-known PE firm. And they had, within the prior year, had just made their first healthcare acquisition. And it was kind of a random connection and conversation. But as I talked to them, they said, well, hey, we're a year into this thing and we're not sure, if we're going the right direction, and we need somebody to help come in and redirect the brand and help us achieve the potential of this business that we think is a gem. And so, we looked at it and talked and agreed for me to come in as the CMO.
Did you feel like what you were able to bring to that conversation again is that trajectory that you've often been on, which is the performance-based marketing aspect of brand is important. People need to know who we are. We need to be in the intender set. But at the same time, let's make sure that we're using all the technology that's available to us to ensure that if, again, we're putting X amount in, that we're getting X back out. That shouldn't be that surprising to hear. It's more common now than maybe it was when we were having that conversation a decade ago. But it's still a conversation that we don't often sometimes see at the CMO level.
Exactly. And that was the conversation. And, they obviously, with their background being retail and restaurant, they understand brand, they understand marketing. They have a really good CMO within their PE group that comes from the DTC world. And so he and I hit it off immediately and talked through, look, there are all these things we can do from a tech stack standpoint and from customer data platform and everything else to drive this business. But we actually had to step way back to the basics. So Jefferson Dental is over 50 years old. And so it started in Texas. There's a brand that's been around for 50 years. Something has happened right, along the way. But as with other brands that have been around that long, they can get stale, they stop evolving, and all of a sudden they're way behind in many ways. And that was this brand. And though they started out 50 years ago by identifying a niche that was very underserved in the dental world, that's where it started, but that's where they stayed. And guess what? Dental is retail. At the end of the day, you've got a 3 to 5 mile radius of your customers, that live within that area around your office. And that evolves over 50 years, as we know. Seems obvious, but this brand had not done that. It just was kind of an old, dental clinic. We have 70 locations now in Texas, but it was a handful of old school dental clinics, not even, not a private practice feel. And so we stepped back and we started with rebuilding the entire team, right? The leadership team was a total change. And most of the senior level experience here, with the exception of myself, is not healthcare. It's retail and direct to consumer, but a deep understanding of customer experience. And that's the key. That's how we built the prior brands in healthcare.
This is a true story. I did go to the dentist today, not in preparation for this, but how do my molars look okay? But it is interesting. I was at my dentist today. I've probably been going to him for 5 years. I love him. It'd be hard for me to maybe change from him, but it is kind of an old school, one dentist, in the old gray building with the same old, there's no customer experience to that process, which again is not a shot at him, but to your point, maybe to some extent, dental, like all fields, can benefit from building a brand and then building a chain of awareness and then creating scale through some elements of that. What are some of the biggest changes you feel like you've brought to that team in your time since taking that position, which I believe was almost 3 years ago now?
Yep. Well, look, to your point on your experience, and to help answer that question, that's the typical kind of dental experience these days. You think of, all these private practices that are really potentially, just really nice, lavish offices. There aren't many of those. Even these private practices are kind of old school. They're not up to date on the technology, right? And so it doesn't mean it's not a good dentist, but maybe maybe you don't, right? And so what we did is we looked at it and said, all right, let's keep this real simple. How do we reverse engineer a 5-star patient experience, right? And what are the elements that go into that? And so it was pretty easy on paper anyhow, because we just looked at the dental space as it is today and identified what was missing. Well, what was missing? Well, one, a scalable patient experience. What are the basics from check-in until the time you check out and everything in between until your next visit, right? So some real basic marketing and messaging and training that we built around that. But bigger picture was really what's missing in dental that we found, especially in the DSO world, dental service organizations like us, multi-location dental practices, but also in private practice, because we mystery shop this all the time, so we know, is that dental practices are not providing comprehensive oral health care to patients. It's very different than your typical healthcare. It's very transactional. It's what do you need today? I'll fix that today and see you in 6 months. We decided that wasn't the best way to serve our patients. So we took a comprehensive approach, and really we're in the middle right now of totally redefining how dentistry is delivered to patients. And our goal is to change that from a grudge purchase to a self-care process and need for our patients, that they feel that they can build a lifetime relationship with our doctors and our offices.
Bringing a proactive approach as opposed to a reactive approach to an industry that's, as to your point, as old as time, and still in many cities, big cities, still has this old world mentality again of gray building, go in, 1 or 2 chairs kind of thing. And it's, if you can make the experience a little bit more experiential, then obviously, it makes you feel less grudge when it comes to that. Talk to me about what you feel like is next for you, there, but at the same time, what are the things that you feel like now that you've kind of dialed into some of the main things to be able to help really rebuild the brand? What do you hope to do next for Jefferson Dental?
You bet. Absolutely. Well, I think the last thing, and it's an answer to your last question and this one, is, we also realized the absolute biggest thing around the comprehensive oral health care was trust and transparency in dental, right? I mean, how many times have you gone to the dentist? We hear this all the time. You go in and they say, hey, you need all this work done. And you're like, well, do I or don't I? You just don't know. So we solve that with technology, right? We have these 3D scanners. We scan every patient. They can see the 3D image of their own mouth, and you can see everything. So we focused on training our doctors to walk through the treatment visually with them so they can actually see it. So as our doctors say, you see what I see. And that breaks through that transparency, and it gives the transparency and breaks through that trust barrier with our patients. That's now how we continue to build and grow going forward. And then what we did is we're the first in the industry to say, all right, we're not going to compensate our team members on production, on how many dollars our team can generate off of a patient. That's in conflict with providing the best care we possibly can. So we have 5 metrics in our offices. I won't go through all of them, but everything is patient experience driven, period. And guess what happens with our offices that deliver the best patient experience on these 5 metrics we measure? And none of them are revenue related, but they happen to have the highest revenue. So from there, what's next? We still have a lot of heavy lifting to do, right? We have 70 locations. You have team members that you have to train and manage this change with. And so our focus day to day is how can we make it more simple every single day to make it easy for our team members to deliver the best patient care possible. And, I simplify it and I go back to, look, who is a brand should we look up to that does this really well? Chick-fil-A. If you've ever been to Chick-fil-A, they have a simple process and they deliver incredible customer service every single time to every single customer that goes through that drive-through line.
That's the thing. So it does take somebody at the top to be able to say, we can make more by making this experience foolproof. You almost never have to look through your bag when you're there to make sure they're giving you the right stuff. They have all these checks in place, all these balances in place. And it is funny to see how many others still are not totally following that path. Listen, I've got a couple more questions for you, if you don't mind. Again, we're on with Adam Arnette, Chief Marketing Officer at Jefferson Dental and Orthodontics. What do you wish you knew more about? You're often the smartest guy in the room, right? I'm sure you walk with a little bit of extra swagger, like, I know how this works, guys, and rightfully so. But what's out there in the marketing space that you still feel like, gosh, I wish I knew more about this? What's that?
That's a great question. I think it is not to default to the easy around data, but it is, look, we all know, we're able to now capture so much data on our customers. And then you have the privacy issues, the changes, with iOS, and everything else. But, how can we truly take that and use it not only to make our marketing more efficient, but truly to improve our customer experience? And, so that's the never ending learning process, right? Because look, you have Salesforce, all these great platforms out there, but it's a lot of heavy lifting to get to the point where you can continue to derive that in a meaningful way. So look, that's where we continue to learn and dive into how we can better utilize the data.
I do think it will be interesting to see how, especially when it comes to that first party data, how much of our data we are willing to share with brands and what the experience is like for us as a consumer. And I do feel like more and more brands are looking at just that. How can we be transparent with what it is that we're trying to provide to this consumer to make them feel comfortable that we're going to be good shepherds of their information and provide them something of value back beyond just, don't worry about this box at the bottom here, just click it and let's move on to the next screen. Last question, which is, who is somebody that has made an impact in your life as a marketer, or maybe a great piece of advice that somebody has given you along the way? Fair question?
Well, look, this is a shameless plug for our own CEO, I guess. Look, our CEO comes from an extensive marketing background with the likes of Nike, Columbia Sportswear, and at very high level, and has launched, brands around superstars that you and I both know the name of, some who've been in the news lately. But point being that he has, and how he translates that to coach teams at scale is actually pretty incredible. And so, whereas, I come from backgrounds where we launched brands that were scalable, this was a different direction for me in, all right, now how do you bring 1,000 people together around that to all focus on, that one goal? And so Mick McCormick is his name. And so
I do feel like a lot of what I'm hearing or seeing a bit out of COVID is that if you have a great coach, even if you're not in the same room, it perhaps, again, just creates opportunity to be able to be, again, forward thinking, perhaps be able to figure out how to motivate people in different ways beyond just, it's Cookies Friday or it's Beer Thursday. So, exactly. And for you, where you're at, that's great that you view him as a mentor that can continue to push, those of us who have a little bit of experience to us. It's sometimes hard when you feel like you've pushed against that ceiling and there's nobody left above you to be able to kind of teach you. You're the one who's always having to teach. Sometimes that can come from youth. Sometimes that can come from the new group that comes in and starts telling you about tokens and Robinhood and all of this kind of stuff. but sometimes it can come from above, which is, again, the beauty of this business really as a whole. So listen, Adam Arnette, thank you for joining us on this episode of the CMO Suite. Adam is the Chief Marketing Officer and Advisor for Jefferson Dental and Orthodontics. Thank you for joining us on the show.
You bet, Sean. Really enjoyed it. Good to talk to you.
Thanks for hanging out in the CMO Suite, the podcast for marketers who want to be in the know, presented by Connectivity Holdings.
You're a C-level manager. You shouldn't have to know the difference between behavioral or contextual targeting, but your agency should. Uconnect provides brands and biddable teams direct access to platforms like The Trade Desk, Google, Amazon, Facebook, OTT, and more. Their US-based traders can train your in-house team or provide complete transparency with no minimums and CPM-based service pricing for true transparency. Something Mighty Hive, The Trade Desk, and Centro simply don't offer. Tired of being the smartest one in the room? Reach out to Uconnect today for a free demo. Uconnect, the world's leader in true transparent biddable media.
This episode of the CMO Suite is also brought to you by Winmo. Winmo is the most comprehensive and widely used advertising database, providing an unfair advantage to media and marketing professionals nationwide. CMO Suite listeners receive complimentary trials of Winmo just by visiting winmo.com/CMO Suite.